Hi, I'm Eves. After quarantine started, I was laid off. And, like many of you, pretty soon I was lonely. Like, really lonely. I was single, living by myself, and I wondered, what if I could create romantic connections in this world of social distance?
Okay, I'm from Canada.
Raised by a single mom.
These are strangers. They exchanged voice memos with each other for 30 days.
First, I just want to say you sound awesome. I listened to your profile.
3 weeks into it, I'm still a little amazed at how much I do like you.
No names, no direct contact.
This is W.
Your voice is very attractive.
I'm very excited to figure out what your name is.
And no pictures.
This is such a weird medium. Oh my God.
This feels like an arranged marriage.
I'm no longer looking to date for sport.
I feel like I'm gonna explode at some point.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220.
I'm Maria Metzler, the Executive Director of Helpline House. The global pandemic has affected us all differently. If you or your neighbors need food assistance, mental health counseling, rental assistance, or Parks and Rec vouchers, please reach out. Helpline House can help in many ways. Find us on the web at helplinehouse.org. It's what we do. Neighbor helping neighbor.
I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the B.I.STANDER Podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's good, Podcastville? You found the B.I.STANDER Podcast. Happy generic time of day to you. I have a very special guest with me today, Heather Lee from the podcast It's Nice to Hear You. Heather, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm so excited to have this conversation, and thanks for taking a couple minutes to talk with me before we got on air here.
Yeah, of course.
So you have a podcast based... God, I'm never going to do this justice, so I want you to handle the heavy lifting of talking right here. But you had a matchmaking experiment, and I recently have been introduced by my mentor to a platform called Clubhouse, which is very much like Facebook or Instagram, but it's all audio. There's rooms of topics, whether it be matchmaking or finding Bigfoot or playing soccer or tech-oriented, lot of money rooms and stuff like that, where you just kind of raise your hand like a Zoom conference, but nobody can see you. And it's all based on an audio discussion. And what I've found out that is really grabbing a lot of people and taking hold of them, because you're having conversations relative to a topic that's interesting to you. Now, you have a very similar idea that I think pops off in a whole nother direction, but you have an audio matchmaking project where, and correct me anytime, step in anytime, Heather.
No, you're doing great.
Where you spend 30 days exchanging audio messages, trying to make a matchmaking match and you kind of play matchmaker, but people don't get to see each other, and they have to have intellectual dialogue for 30 days before they can have a possibility of meeting each other. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the general premise. Getting to know each other without any visuals, no profile pictures, and there's also no real-time interaction. So it's asynchronous voice memo exchanges.
And I feel like I'm totally cheating on the whole process because I'm looking you face to face right now. The first time we met, the first time we had a conversation, and we're actually getting to see each other. What does that feel like after you've kind of been in this for about a year or so in this project?
Well, the actual experiment was only for 30 days, but it took me about 9 months to write about it. When I came up with the idea for the experiment, I wanted to create a podcast. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to do voice memos. I figured I'll use the content, all of this recorded audio content, and I could create a story out of that. That was the general premise. But it took me a lot longer to craft a story. There's a lot of angles, and I had to kind of figure out what is it that I wanted to say, what is the story that I am most optimized to tell. That process was 9 months.
Wow. So, gosh, I have so many questions that it's hard to even pick one to start with. But how many participants did you have in this audio experiment, and where did you find them? Was it like a cattle call at a studio, like, hey, we're looking for Joey from Friends, anybody come on down?
Yeah, I had about 100. So my goal for myself is I would get 100 people to sign up for the experiment before I start matching them. So I did get 100 people, and then I tried all sorts of ways. It was a lot harder to find single people to sign up for an experiment like this than I had expected. Going in, I was like, how hard could it be? There's like, everyone's lonely. There's a lot of single people out there. Everyone's stuck at home now. So I didn't expect it to be this hard, but it is kind of a unique concept when you think about online dating. Like, of course, there would be pictures and there would be real-time interaction and you have access, but this experiment took away all of those things. But I tried, tapping into my network, trying to get friends of friends to sign up. And I experimented with posting on social, Instagram, meetup groups, Facebook groups, like trying to find all these niche, conscious listening, online dating type groups to spread the word. I tried to contact a bunch of matchmakers and relationship therapists to see if they might have clients of theirs or if they know people in their networks who might be interested in signing up. But it took me about a month, I would say, to get 100 people. But it's really a mix of things that I tried.
So let me take you back. And what was when you had this idea, you had this epiphany, what was your goal in mind? What were you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, there's a few things. The reason why I started it was because I was seeing this guy who sent me voice memos, and that experience of receiving it and listening it was so novel. And I haven't experienced that in a romantic context before. I thought that was interesting. And then things with that guy basically festered off, but the memory of him sending me voice memos was always there. And then at the time on Netflix, I don't know if you've heard of this show called Love is Blind that was kind of blowing up in March 2020. And a lot of my friends were watching it. And the premise for this show is a reality TV show where people only get to know their matches with voice. Like, they were in these separate pods and the contestants speak to each other through a wall. And as with, reality TV, it's super dramatic and they cast the characters and people actually proposed before they even saw what their match looked like. And then the cameras follow them to like honeymoon. But this idea around voice was percolating in my head. You know, this guy who sent me voice memos, and then watching Love is Blind on Netflix. So that was one element I wanted to explore, this idea around, could voice lead to deeper emotional connection? If we got rid of the stimulus of visuals and profile pictures and just focus on voice, like, could that be a channel to tap into deeper intimacy? And so that was one question. And then the other thing was, I wanted to learn about how to make a podcast. So just exercising those creative muscles of creative writing, putting together a story, creating something from nothing, learning about everything that goes into podcast production. So that was kind of the more skill building side of it. That was interesting. And then opportunistically, I was laid off at the time. So I had all this time, and I didn't want to look for a new job immediately. It was during quarantine, and I figured I'm going to just immerse myself in this creative project to, one, learn about voice and voice in the context of dating, and then two, learning about podcasting and writing a story.
And you were living in Chelsea, New York at the time when you started that?
Yeah,
No,
correct.
you guys were heavily locked down because my sister-in-law lives pretty close to where you resided back there.
Yeah, totally. It was a different city entirely. Like, no one was out on the streets, and it was kind of dramatic to see how everything shut down so quickly.
It's a whole nother world in Seattle, LA, and New York for sure. Did you find that people were more honest with their voice messages than perhaps their profile pictures and their Instagram and who they were trying to present themselves as?
I mean, I didn't really have their profile pictures or Instagram to compare.
But I mean, let's say you're following, Zac Efron or whatever on Instagram, and he's putting all these glorious pictures up and stuff. Isn't that curtain kind of pulled back when it's just audio?
Yeah, I think audio is definitely one component of it. Just the intimacy around recording into your phone. I was surprised by how long these messages were. Within a few days, the messages were like 40 minutes long, between people. So a lot of people treated them as self-recordings, basically. It's also asynchronous, right? So I'm just recording into my phone at this point in time, and then my match will get it at some future point in time, and then they'll listen to my voice. I was surprised by how long the recordings were. And when you're in that intimate space, like, you're probably recording in your house, in your bedroom, like, that just feels very private, and I'm sure that impacts the mental state. And these people also self-selected into this experiment. Anyone who's going to sign up for an experiment like this is probably more, I mean, I'm making a huge generalization, but of my participants, they were definitely more interested in emotional connection. Part of this conscious listening group, like, they are interested in self-exploration, interested in empathy and talking about feelings, and so that might have something to do with it too, just the selection bias of what type of people this project attracted.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anybody that sent in audio, because you vetted every audio, right, before it got passed on to the next person?
Correct. Yeah. And the reason for that was mostly to maintain the anonymity. Like, I wanted to make sure that people didn't accidentally say their names or something too personally identifiable to compromise that. And then also just to, like, inform me as the experiment went on, like, what type of things are people saying? There was also a prompt component every day. I would send a prompt to the participants. Whether or not they choose to engage is totally up to them, but a prompt could be something like, record an audio tour of your house, and share it with your match. Like go on a walk, take your match on a walk with you and share the colors and the smells. And, you know, it just like brings another dimension to the content that they were sharing. And with the prompts, it's like a third party. You feel maybe more permissioned to talk about those things, and it does surface some other topics that might not come up as fast organically. But yeah, listening to the audio messages beforehand helped me think about prompts to give them as well.
Okay, I want to get off this experiment for a quick sec and try to find some humor in this and say, was there an audio message that was way off the mark that just blew your mind?
In terms of surprises, sure. There are so many things that people disclosed and how quickly people disclosed them, like
Open
so many
books.
points. Yeah, just so many things that people shared, private things, vulnerable things to a stranger. You don't even know their name, right? That was definitely surprising.
Yeah. But no crazy story you can tell.
I mean, I made a whole podcast about it. So, you know, like people confessing like, oh, I've never been in love, you know, like that. I would think that it's a pretty vulnerable share. Talking about private things with their family, past relationships, and, you know, just thinking about how they could share and articulate these things to a stranger that they haven't met. You know, that one demonstrates the power of voice, and also maybe just how communicative and affectionate people are, which is something that I've learned for sure. What feels vulnerable to me might not be vulnerable to other people. So just calibrating
Good point.
how I would communicate in certain situations versus what other people say. And so rarely do we have a window into the private conversations of other people. So just getting that privilege to hear what people say privately was a huge surprise and like learning opportunity.
Yeah, that's what I pride myself about the Bystander podcast that we're doing right now, is that people can be a fly on the wall and listen to a conversation that they're not privy to on a regular daily basis. And perhaps we're stimulating some discussion that they've been wanting to talk about or think about or get involved in or had no idea, which is kind of cool. Because like, instead of me just talking to Heather or Heather just talking to myself, we're talking to a lot of people, you know, hundreds of people, and they're sharing this conversation, even though they're not participating. They're getting the gist of something that's really, I would like to strongly suggest that you go listen to, because your social experiment blew my mind away. So when you got into this, were you thinking about being like, okay, so let me dial this back, see if I can frame this question correctly. You lose your job, it's quarantine, you're locked down in New York forever. Did you want to do this social experiment just to do a social experiment? Or were you thinking about becoming a matchmaker? Or were you looking for love yourself because you did participate in this anonymously as a character outside your real self?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I first started, I definitely did not have ambitions to be a matchmaker or create an online dating app. But now that I've gone through this experiment and kind of learned a lot of insights around dating, I definitely see an opportunity in online dating for more niche concepts like this. Not necessarily to create like a voice forward dating app. But this idea around emotional connection, maybe emotional connection first and then physical connection. Like that was kind of a premise for the experiment. Like, I think there could be an interesting business idea around how to scale that. So yeah, to answer your question, no, that was not an intention in the beginning, but now I definitely see some opportunities.
Now, was it an intention for you to find somebody to date as well?
No.
You're just participating.
Well, I didn't participate. I was facilitating everything on the back end, and making the matches happen. And I didn't match myself with anyone.
Oh.
But part of through doing this experiment, I learned a lot about dating, like how to date better. What do I need to improve on if I wanted to be a better partner? So, and that's a lot of what the podcast is, like the lessons that I've learned. And now I am dating someone, not because I met them through the experiment, but I think I am able to date more successfully because of the lessons that I learned and just from observing and eavesdropping into the participants.
I think you bring up a lot of things like reflection, compatibility, the acceptance of who you are and who others are, how vulnerable you can show yourself to other people, and just not necessarily a new art, but a finite art of communication. And I think there's lots of lessons to be learned. And one thing that struck me as a unique pivot in your podcast was you had a voice psychologist on, right?
Yeah, you're talking about behavioral signals, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So
see, I'm new to it, but
yeah.
It's exciting, and I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, it was super interesting to partner with them, and I'm just so grateful for their partnership. It's called Behavioral Signals, and they're a speech recognition company. It's a tech company, and they work with a lot of, call centers like major banks. And if you call into Bank of America, like it's probably their software that's powering a lot of the call centers. And they applied their algorithm onto all of the voice messages that I got, and they were able to say, like, this is the emotions that we can detect just from how people talk. It's not even like reading the words of what they're saying, but just focusing on tone, pitch, are there any pauses? There are thousands of features that they classify someone's voice, how they speak. So I can't even pretend to explain like what all of those thousands of features are, but they basically can detect the emotion that people are emitting. And that's interesting because you can map that over time. Like 30 days is not a long enough time. And also 100 people is definitely not enough of a sample size. But for the specific pairs that I do talk about in the podcast, there were some interesting insights, like saying, oh, this person was more nervous in week 1, and then he became less so. And you can pinpoint exactly the arc of how that happened. Also seeing how their communication styles evolve towards each other. And that's something that has been denoted in linguistic studies, like for people who do have a connection or couples, there has been scientific studies that show our language patterns evolve towards our partners in terms of speech or the pitch. So it's very subtle, but technology can measure it over time.
Yeah, wasn't there like a strength of spoken word too, where there's confidence or insecurity that's picked up by vibration or whatnot? I often think of myself as somebody that's kind of monotone or dry, just kind of like just stay the same type of pitch. And I like how you decided not to be evaluated yourself. But I know when you're doing your narrative stuff, you have a certain voice cadence. And talking to you now after the podcast is done, I can already pick up on all this positive energy and strength that you have in your voice. And it's pretty awesome. And I'd like to obtain that too. So this is another tree branch or whatever I'd like to climb on and say, hey, it's body language, it's posture, it's inflection, it's tone, it's listening, there's so many elements to communication. What are some of the takeaways that you had that you obviously learned from this experiment and have taken into your regular life and are thankful for it?
Yeah, for sure. Communication is a big thing. One, just projection is real. Like how I think I am perceived is not necessarily how other people perceive me, or what my preferences are may not be the preferences for someone else. There's one section in the episode where I talk about love language. So there are 5 different love languages, and different people can have different languages. Like maybe your love language is words of affection, and then for someone else is physical touch. Like if you're not receiving your love language, you might just feel unloved, when that's not necessarily the case. Like if my love language is words of affection and I'm just like giving you all these positive affirmations, but you don't interpret that the same way that I do, there could be problems in that relationship. Yeah. So just having an understanding of that was super powerful. So I am, now in dating and just even in daily life, like communication is so critical, right? Being aware of tone and just how double checking, like how I think that I'm coming across. Am I really coming across that way? Like what is the preferred communication style for that other person? So always just having that awareness is helpful for sure. I can go on and on about all these other lessons, around vulnerability. What does that really mean? One insight I learned is vulnerability is very different from being open. Vulnerability requires you to really feel scared. Like if you feel threatened by something that you're sharing or communicating, that could be vulnerability. But if you're just talking about, private, intimate things, that's not necessarily vulnerable. And vulnerability is so key to developing a deeper connection with someone. But it also needs to be reciprocated. A connection requires both people to be vulnerable with each other. So if I'm vulnerable to you, then, hopefully over time you reciprocate that and we share more and more vulnerable things with each other. And that's how you develop connection and intimacy. But so many things, yeah.
Sounds like you really enjoyed this project. Did it pull you out of any type of depression, or was it a grind, or was it something that just kind of slowly came around?
No, I mean, I wouldn't characterize myself as depressed at the time. It was definitely a shock to not have a job and all of a sudden being in quarantine for the unforeseeable future. There's so many things happening with the world, just, with like bigger things, climate change, and everyone being so like all the vitriol in media. Like it's hard not to think about all of those negative things around me at the time a year ago. And working on this project, it kind of was very joyful and hopeful. Like that was kind of the overall tone. So having the privilege of being reminded about the positivity of humanity, how great it is to really connect with someone and really appreciating these moments. That was nice. And also learning a new skill set. It's definitely challenging to create a podcast and not having a background in radio, but being able to learn a new skill set is always a rewarding experience.
You did a good job of surrounding yourself with a good team, with the branding and editing and people chiming in their opinions and having a complete support group. And that's a great way to start a podcast for sure.
Yeah.
Did you move to LA to sell the movie?
No, I moved to LA because my lease in New York was ending, and opportunistically it was ending at the beginning of October. So it was about to be winter, and I didn't want to quarantine in New York during the winter. So I figured I'll try out the West Coast. If there was a time to do it, it would be now. I wasn't really beholden to New York. So I moved to LA for warmer weather.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how New York and Californians are kind of exiting those states. California because of the tax reasons, and New York because of the restrictions. And it seems like Miami and Austin are being hotbeds. Up here in Seattle, it's been pretty difficult. The city's taken quite a hit. Lots of old school restaurants shuttered and such. And
yeah,
we had a world-class waterfront, being built because we're kind of a port city here. And it's just homelessness and despair and shuttered buildings. And we were going in such a positive direction prior to the pandemic. So, and I don't know if pandemics have the pandemic here has brought more people into podcasting, definitely creating, but I don't know about listening because there's no commute time and people aren't out and about on walks and they're spending more time with their families and such. It'll be interesting to see at the end of the summer where the podcast world stands. What was your background before this? Pre-pandemic.
I started my career in investment banking, and then I held a few different corporate finance roles, and then I went to business school to pivot into retail. So right before the pandemic, I worked in experiential retail in strategy and operations.
And now you're a podcaster. I love it.
Yeah, it's been really nice to create something from nothing.
Yeah, and I think you have, a cutting edge idea that has evergreen content, and you're kind of one of the first to arrive there. And kudos to you. I'm really proud and thankful I discovered your podcast.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to spotlight it.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm on the inside track because, like, first meet, I get to see you, and nobody else did.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you still stay in touch with anybody from the experiment? And second part of that question would be, did anybody have a love match?
Yeah, I mean, of the people that I profiled in the podcast, there were 3 pairs. 2 of them ended up dating.
That's what I'm talking about. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not married, but they did end up dating. I do have a personal friend. She was in episode 4 of the podcast, who participated. So I do obviously still keep in touch with her since she's my friend, but I make it a point not to really keep in touch with other people. I did a debrief with the other pairs that I profiled for the podcast, but I don't have an ongoing conversation.
What's your next move?
I would love to do a season 2. Not exactly the same way, but I do enjoy this social experimentation aspect of it. I like the topic of human connection. Obviously within a romantic context is one way to go, but there's a lot of other flavors of human connection. Yeah. So I would love to do season 2, but I would need sponsors, and I'm hoping to pitch to a few different places after the last episode comes out. But for the first season, I self-funded it. And for season 2, if I want to do a more expanded and bigger version of it, I definitely need some corporate support. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to do that.
Speaking of that, you can subscribe to my podcast on Patreon, and in the story details, please buy some mud water, the coffee alternative that you're dying to have. Actually, I'm 2 months off coffee on mud water, completely mushroom coffee alternative, and it's good stuff. It's kind of like chai tea.
Oh, got it. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a subscription service, so you get a discount and the show gets a little bit of money. Affiliate marketing. Please check that out. Tell people where they can find your podcast and how they can support your endeavors.
Yeah, the show is called It's Nice to Hear You, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more information, check out itsnicetohearyou.com or on Instagram at It's Nice to Hear You.
Heather Lee, you rock. I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a cool experiment. Awesome podcast. I can't wait for the finale, and I wish you all the best going forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so lovely to chat and meet, and let me know if you're ever in LA.
And if you're ever up in the PNW Wonderland, come on up and we'll take care of you as well. Please stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Best wishes.
Have a good week. Bye.
Take care. You've been listening to Bystander. Be kind.
Wake up in the morning, yawning, cops watching, wait to kick the dough in, cause I know I got them dope pins and it don't end, so my enemies got no friends. Yeah, it don't end. I wake up in the morning, yawning, cops watching, wait to kick the dough in, cause I know I got them dope pins and it don't end, so my enemies got no friends. Yeah, it don't end. You come to my hood and tell me how to live, I think I'm good. That's not how it is, not how it works. So hours I work on my craft like I'm leaving the earth, like trees in the earth, getting deep in the dirt. Not for reason I search, that's for the birds, like the season of terps. You see, yeah. At first, you're the only thing I need on this earth, then well, you're the only reason I hurt. At first, you're the only thing I need on this earth, then well, only reason I hurt. Maybe, baby, that's just how I twist it. But I know you got a hit list of misters who diss it, so now I can't have your big lips. Just wanna love you for real though, but when you come to work, you wear your steel toes, so you can't feel no access to your seal, so and so I gotta pay the bill though and get fed, barely half the meal slow. Girl, yeah, love is all I'm really here for. Wake up in the morning, yawning, cops watching, wait to kick the dough in, cause I know I got them dope pins and it don't end, so my enemies got no friends. Yeah, it don't end. I wake up in the morning, yawning, cops watching, wait to kick the dough in, cause I know I got them dope pins and it don't end, so my enemies got no friends. Yeah, it don't end. See, me, I always been a thinker. See, you telling me we gon' sink, don't compute in my brain. I don't just shoot, I'm careful of my aim, and I'll be shooting till you care for the same. On the same tree like some pears, I'm just saying we all have prayers for the same. Already there is the plane, cop you a ticket, have you a visit to where bliss is. First, you're the only thing I need on this earth, then but you're the only reason I hurt. At first, you're the only thing I need on this earth, then but you're the only reason I hurt. Ralph Rain. Yeah, it's Ralph Rain.